Shalom, WJC family. It's time for our weekly Torah talk. This week in Shul, we will be reading Chayei Sarah, and this is the parsha that takes place immediately following the death of Sarah, and Abraham decides Isaac needs a wife, maybe some connection to comforting him about his mother's loss. And so, oddly, Abraham sends his servant Eliezer to go back to Aram Naharaim, back to where he's from, to see his family, to take a wife, to find a wife for Isaac from his kin, from whence he originally came. There's a lot we could say about this whole incident. I want to use it as an opportunity to talk about prayer and faith, because Eliezer, upon his arrival in Aram, has a very controversial moment where he says a prayer. This is Genesis 24, starting at verse 12, but the important part is at verse 14. He says a prayer to God. He says, "Look, I know you always deal graciously with my master Abraham. Here I am at a spring, and the daughters of the town are coming to get water. Let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink, and who replies, drink and I'll also water your camels, let her be the one whom you have decided for your servant Isaac. Thereby shall I know that you have dealt graciously with my master." Right? Don't do it for me, do it for Abraham. He'd scarcely finished speaking when Rebecca, who was related to Abraham's brother, born to Abraham's brother, came out with her jar on her shoulder and offered him water and his camels. Now, it doesn't sound so controversial, but the rabbis are really disturbed by this. In the Talmud, there's a couple places where they say, specifically, especially in Tanit 4a, where they say, what kind of prayer is this? He just left up to fate who should be the wife of Isaac? What if, now, take this from the cultural milieu in which it comes. What if a disabled girl, a lame girl, or a blind girl should come? What if a slave girl should come and offer water? Was he going to be obligated then to make that disabled person Isaac's wife? Now, of course, for us, we'd be like, so what? You know, she's amazingly kind. Who cares? But for the rabbis, this was a real problem. I think what's really bothering them is not so much what the girl would be like, but just that he was leaving it up to faith, that this prayer, so to speak, this petition to God was pretty prideful, right? God's going to choose. So that's the rabbinic approach. A lot of the commentators come back, they say, no, it's fine for all these different reasons. And we're left kind of wondering, is this what prayer is all about? Ask God for specific things and God will provide them for us in that way. Well, look, prayer is a complicated idea, but I think maybe one way to read this whole incident with Eliezer is not as a passage about prayer, but rather as a passage about faith, or bitachon, trust in God. And I want to share a story originally shared by Rabbi Yosef Yossel Hurwitz, the altar of Novradok, as it's found translated in a book called Novradok, translated by Rabbi Dr. Meir Levin. It's a story about bitachon. The story says, there was once an unlearned fellow who eked out a bare living by digging and selling lime. And he heard the holy Alshich, right, one of the great Kabbalistic ravs of the Ottoman Empire. He heard the holy Alshich extol the virtues of bitachon, of security, of trust in God. And he said to himself, am I crazy? Since this works without the need for intermediaries, why should I break my back in hard labor? I can stop working and receive all my needs with no trouble. Why should I labor night and day to earn what would come to me anyway? So he makes a decision and he sticks with it. He stayed warm by his stove and he just recited Psalms all day long. His wife and children begged him, come on, take the horse, go out and work. And he said, "What are you, crazy? I heard the Alshech say that he who trusts in God receives sustenance without effort. So why should I go out in the cold and the sleet and dig? Till now I didn't know that. Fine, so I did it. I worked so hard, but why should I now? And you, my dear ones, my children and my wife, you should also have bitachon. You should also trust in God." So they listened to their father, they listened to their husband, and soon they were destitute, and they were forced to sell their horse and their cart just to have wood for their stove. The new owner of the horse and cart went to dig for lime, and he found a great treasure that someone had hid in the ground, and he loaded it in the cart. And just as he finished loading into the cart, a boulder shook loose from a nearby hill, and it hit the new owner of the cart, and he perished, he died. The horse had its habit of going back to its original owner. And so, treasure on the cart goes back, the horse to the place. The children unload the cart, and there's this amazing treasure. And they ran to tell the father, "Your bitachon has saved you. We found a great treasure." So this story gets back to the Alshech and to his students. And they were disturbed by this. They said, "How is it that this man is greater than we are?" And the Alshech said, "A post sunk into hard ground will stand forever. A post in soft plowed earth sways from side to side and does not stay in place." The lime digger accepted what he heard from the Alshech completely, with no doubts or reservations. He took it as if there was no other way to live except by bitachon, except by trust. The students, however, were soft ground. Right? "He who is greater than his fellow, his evil urge is greater," says Sukkah, the Talmud in Tractate Sukkah. They turned everything over and over in their minds. Yes and no and maybe. Should one really rely on a miracle? Or maybe one can't rely on a miracle. The outcome was a soft bitachon, a soft trust, soft ground, an uncertain commitment, and it did not work. In other words, in his ignorance, the lime digger actually was able to have greater trust. All your learning, the Alshech is telling his students, actually has sowed more doubt in you. It's made it harder for you to have true trust and faith in God. And I relate to that. It seems the more we learn, the more doubts there are in our lives, the more questions. Now, if you know me, you know I love learning. I'm certainly not suggesting that we don't learn. However, maybe there is something we can learn from Eliezer's prayer. That when we are in a stance of prayer, the more we can release all our questions and our doubts, all the things that make us soft in the ground, soft ground for a post to stand in. And in that moment, turn to our prayer with just complete and total faith. The more effective that prayer will be. I am not saying that what we ask for is going to appear right before us the way Rivka appears before Eliezer, or this treasure appears for the poor lime digger. But maybe there's another kind of answer to our prayer. Maybe in that faith, in that trust, in that connection, and giving ourselves over to something greater than ourselves, maybe in a sense that is itself an answer to a prayer. The lesson from Eliezer, I don't think, is prayer is magic. It would be nice if it were, if we could say the prayer just right, and that would mean it's coming true for sure. All we have to do is have enough faith. But I don't think that's the message. I think the message is when we can really be in relationship with God, just like we're in relationship with our friends and other people, when we can ask. And just like our friends and other people, we don't always know that we're going to receive what we need. But knowing we have that connection is comforting. Knowing that there is that relationship, maybe that's enough to keep us going, at least for that mission, for that goal, for that day, for that year. And so I hope we can all cultivate an Eliezer-like faith, an Eliezer-like connection to God, that we can all feel that presence, that we are not alone, especially when there's things we deeply desire, that we can have trust, if not that whatever we want is going to fall right into our lap. Trust that we are never alone in waiting and seeking and hoping for that which is going to help us complete our purpose in life, bring tikkun to the world, and make us, be able to see the beauty and the holiness and our purpose in this world. Shabbat Shalom.